I got to start with President Trump's interview with CNBC on Tuesday afternoon. Obviously, Tuesday morning. Obviously, he's trying desperately to reassure markets and reassure the business community that he hasn't lost it. Well, I don't think this interview did that. I mean, it would take longer to fact check the interview than the interview itself. I don't know if he said a single factual thing that was correct when he just talked about whether it was redistricting, talked about tariffs, talked about the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm sure there were a couple of things we can claim were factually correct, but it's very difficult. And in fact, it was so bizarre and meandering. In some ways, we have the same issue with Trump that we had with Biden, but Biden, they didn't let talk to the press, right? We never saw him. And the occasional times we did would raise eyebrows like, oh, huh. With Trump, we hear and see him all the time. So we're kind of numb to the fact that he rarely speaks truth and really doesn't seem very informed and it's possible. And I think the biggest thing we have to sort of ask ourselves, in the same way that there was a cocoon of people that were protecting Biden from the press and keeping the press away from Biden during his term, there's clearly a group of people that feed him false information to make him feel better, false information about the polls, false information about the economy. Like he thinks the gas prices are lower than they actually are, and he thinks his poll ratings are higher than they actually are, and he thinks the economy is in better shape than it actually is. Now, you could say, well, Donald Trump's been doing this forever and forever, but yeah, he's the president of the United States, and it does, when you listen to him, this is a different, it is not, I think it's a fair question. Is he all there, or is he not being well served? Either way, it's just as bad as what we experienced as a country with Joe Biden and as a press corps. And we should be equally alarmed for different ways and for different reasons. But it's clear that he's either not getting information. He is being intentionally misled about the state of the economy, intentionally misled about what's happened, or he wants to intentionally mislead, right? It doesn't matter which it is. The outcome is the same. And it's quite troubling, right? And the thing about the Bureau of Labor Statistics situation is that, this is where it's the slippery slope, where he's just poisoning all of government data. And maybe that's a feature, not a bug, right? Like ultimately, there are people in this movement. I think there are genuine conservatives that support President Trump that also believe in the democracy. But I think there's also people who are exploitive that are involved in this movement, who do want to destroy government and who do want to delegitimize government data. And Donald Trump is carrying out this mission. And delegitimizing government data is how we will get sicker children, why measles has been spread. I mean, obviously I said, I think the most alarming thing that has happened is what's happening at HHS. This should be the 5-alarm fire that every media organization is focused on, because data, misleading Americans on data is killing them. Hard stop. It's not a figure of speech. It is a literal thing that is happening when it comes to the measles. And this delegitimizing of economic data is how a modern Western economy can get destroyed. And as I said previously, this is what Richard Nixon did. And he caused basically the second worst economic downturn that we had as a country for over a decade since, after the Great Depression. So this is how dangerous it is. But just to give you a sense, and this is a small thing, and it leads into, like, today I'm emptying the political notebook. So it's all things having to do with 2026. So I'm going to kick off with redistricting. And he was asked about redistricting in this interview, and Trump said this. I want to quote him exactly because it's important here. He said, "We have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats." And then he goes on to claim, "I got the highest vote in the history of Texas, as you probably know, and we are entitled to 5 more seats." And you're just sitting there going, okay, Donald Trump got 56% of the vote in Texas. And you're trying to sit there as the highest vote ever. It's not even the highest vote total for a Republican in the 21st century. It's not the highest. It's not at the 5th highest vote total since World War II. It's not in the top 5 at all, right? No matter what. I guess if you use the metric of this century, maybe you could say he's gotten the 3rd most of a Republican. But he claimed, by the way, in the history of Texas. And they actually went back and forth, right? Kernan knew he was probably full of it. And Trump was like insisting. And
here we go. So you did get the highest number of votes in Texas, so that's true. But when you're talking about,
then you don't have to say anything more, Joe.
I got to say this.
No, don't say anything more.
No,
don't qualify it by saying,
no,
I got the highest number of votes.
You did.
In the history
did. I'm moving
of
on. I'm moving on.
Kernan was saying he would get grief for not getting fact checked. And Joe's an old friend. Hi, Joe. Yes, I'm fact checking you on this, so I'm helping you out here. So just so you know, George W. Bush in 2004 got 61% in Texas. In 2000, Bush got 59%. In 1984, Reagan got 63%. Nixon in 72 got 66% in Texas. LBJ in 64 got 63% in Texas. Harry Truman in 1948 got 66% in Texas. That's just since World War II. So Donald Trump 56% is 7th since World War II. Okay? And here's my favorite kicker. The president he has emulated in history, the non-consecutive term president of Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland did better in Texas both times that he won the presidency. He got 57% the first time and 69% the second time. So that's sort of how absurd it is. And now what's interesting about, Trump and his 56%. So 56% is if there's been this argument, what do you do with what should be the proper way a state should create its delegation? How much should the statewide vote matter? Now, look, I spend a lot of time in my Substack post this week, so go check it out. I have this entire sort of potential various ways we could create some actual metrics, so we could sort of take politics out of the system and sort of force some metrics to actually guide what's fair. Because my biggest frustration about this fight over redistricting is nobody wants to be fair in the process, right? Donald Trump is actively calling for an unfair map in Texas in order to manipulate the midterm election so he can salvage his House majority so he's not embarrassed and his MAGA movement isn't put into the dustbin of history because he can't hold Congress because it's a rejection of his movement. So he wants to try to rig the election in his favor by forcing this gerrymander. He's calling for unfairness. And now the Democratic Party's response is to say, well, if you're going to be unfair there, then we're going to be unfair in California and we're going to be unfair in New York. And the Republicans are saying, fine, we'll be unfair in Ohio and we'll be unfair in Missouri. You're unfair in Illinois. Well, that was his argument there. And it's true. Illinois is a huge gerrymandered state. And by the way, little memo to the Texas Democrats. There's plenty of places to escape Texas if you're trying to prevent a quorum, and I understand that tactic. I might not have gone to the state of Illinois, home of the worst gerrymander on the Democratic side of the aisle. You might have been better off going to a place like Colorado or going to a place like that is a Democratic state and actually did it honestly and with fairness involved or something like that. So or Virginia, whatever. There were other places to go, but I understand that the governor of Illinois is paying the bill. So there is some sense of that you have to go there. But I do think that just optically, Illinois was a bad choice, in sort of the same way that milk was a bad choice for Ron Burgundy.